I'm working on a design that employs the newly available Plaid yarns. I thought you might like to see the process. You are looking at Premier Plaid yarn laid out in a pattern so that you can see how it works. Green, blue, dark gray, light gray, and then the repeat begins. What's different about this than any multicolored yarn is that each repeat is supposed to be exactly the same length. I don't mean that the sections of green and blue are exactly the same length. I mean that from the beginning of one green section to the beginning of the next green section is supposed to be exactly the same length. And that will make it possible for us to predict planned pooling and get a plaid design with very little work. Now I'm ready to go, but I want to point out something first. We're starting with a light gray section, moving to dark gray, then to blue, and finally to green. This is the opposite of what I showed you before because I unwound from the outside of the ball to show it to you. So we'll need to make that repeat over and over. And what I'm doing is I'm starting on the maximum number of needles that I think that I might need. You cannot decide you absolutely have to have 31 and also get plaid. You're going to have to be a little bit adjustable. So this is more suitable for things like ponchos, scarves, and blankets where you can be flexible than for perfectly fitted clothes. What I've done is I've cast on and waste yarn, then add a color change. I knotted a loop into the yarn and hung it on a needle that's not actually cast on as a placeholder, so that when I begin knitting, it will be with the gray yarn, or in other words, the very beginning of one repeat, so I can tell where I am. Now I'm going to go off camera and knit across. And I'm going to do that with this one needle that's just holding my loop in hold. It's not part of the pattern. It's designed to give me a starting point that is secure and definite. Here's our row completed. Now what we want to do is undo stitches to the point that the repeat is complete. So I want to undo one green stitch so as to make the color pattern begin shifting on the next row. And at this point we can come down here and release the held stitch. That's all it was for. So let's release stitches. I'm almost up to the last of the grays. There's a little bit of a judgment call as it changes color. But I'd call this, well, maybe the next one the last gray. And this, the first green. So I'll undo that. Then I can just drop off these waste yarn stitches. They'll just sit there and behave themselves. They're not important to the design. Did you see me make an accidental stitch? I could have practiced all year and not succeeded in doing that. Alright, at this point, we just begin to knit and see what we get. By the way, I ended up with 70 stitches, which will be adequate to what I'm trying to do, I think. Every machine is a little bit unique, but just for your information, I decided to use stitch size 6 on my Brother 260. Well, here's what I have so far. It is definitely making a pattern. Sadly, it's not a pattern that I particularly like or hoped for. So I'm back to the drawing board. I'm going to reduce the width by 1 stitch because experience has taught me 1 stitch can make an enormous difference, and see what I get next. Aha! This is more what I hoped I would get. Of course, it will still be pulled lengthwise and change a little bit, but I can see myself placing 2 panels side by side and getting an argyle-like effect with them, so I think I'll keep going. To do what I'm hoping to do, I'm going to need 4 panels all alike. So I'm going to separate them with a few rows of waste yarn first. This panel, the one I'm probably going to save, did begin right where light gray changed to dark gray. So I will need to do that with every one of the panels, otherwise they won't make the same design. In the end, I reduced my stitch count by 1 additional stitch to get the pattern that you see in the finished poncho. The plaid-like look is considerably more convincing at a distance than it is when your face is up close to the fabric, but it's workable. I do have some other plaid projects planned with this and other plaid yarn.